History class left these out. 3 events so shocking, you'll wonder why you never learned them. 1 involved children marching across Europe, another toppled an empire, and the last one? It's almost too insane to believe. Stick around because number 1 will change the way you think about history forever. Let's kick things off with number 10, the disappearance of the samurai. So the samurai were this legendary class of warriors in Japan from the 12th to the 19th century. They started as a decentralized military group made up of provincial governors who took control of land after defeating the Taira clan in the Genpei War back in 1185. That victory set the stage for 2 distinct courts in Japan. The imperial court stayed in Kyoto, while the other moved to Kamakura. Fast forward to 1192, and the Kamakura shogunate came into power, marking the start of the samurai era. These fierce warriors served their daimyo lords and lived by a strict code called Bushido, which was all about loyalty, honor, courage, and self-discipline. But you might be wondering, how did such a powerful and disciplined group just vanish? Well, the answer lies in the Meiji Restoration of 1868. This was when a group of anti-shogunate samurai overthrew the Tokugawa shogunate and returned power to the emperor. Big changes were on the horizon for Japanese society, including the end of the samurai class. With a new centralized government in place, the feudal system got dismantled, and samurai were given noble titles along with financial compensation for their lands. They even got the right to own property and start businesses. But here's the catch. Even with these reforms, the samurai's traditional role as warriors was no longer needed. They had to adapt to new roles in a rapidly modernizing Japan. Many former samurai became bureaucrats, while others jumped into business or industry. However, not everyone was on board with these changes. Some samurai resisted the shift away from their traditional lifestyles, creating tensions between the old ways and the new order in Japanese society. This transition was a mix of progress and challenges as Japan opened up to the West, leaving behind centuries of tradition. Moving on to number 9, we have the last official Civil War widow. Meet Helen Viola Triggs, who holds the title of the last official Civil War widow in the United States. She earned this title because her late husband, John Viola Triggs, was the only casualty of the U.S. Civil War who hasn't been officially accounted for. Her story really highlights the deep impact of war and the lasting legacy of those who serve our country. Helen's journey began during the Civil War when her husband, Private John Viola Triggs, enlisted in the Union Army at just 14 years old, hiding his true age to join the fight. Tragically, Private Triggs went missing on April 9, 1865, just weeks before the war ended, during a battle near Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. Despite extensive searches, his remains were never found. For decades, Helen and her family held on to the hope that he would be discovered. As years turned into decades, the chances of finding Private Triggs seemed slimmer and slimmer. The passage of time only deepened the mystery of his disappearance. What happened to him? Where had he been all these years? Fast forward to today, and after a long and tireless campaign by Helen and the National Park Service, Private John Viola Triggs was finally identified through DNA testing in 2018. His remains were then laid to rest with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. This identification and burial brought closure to his family and a sense of finality to his story. It also serves as a powerful reminder of the countless lives touched by the Civil War and the importance of preserving their stories for future generations. Private John Viola Triggs was finally identified through DNA testing in 2018. His remains were then buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. The identification and burial of Private Triggs finally brought some peace to his family and closed the chapter on his story. It's a powerful reminder of how many lives were affected by the Civil War and how important it is to keep their stories alive for future generations. Now, let's dive into number 8. But before we do, I just want to give a huge shout out to all our amazing supporters. Seriously, thank you for watching and being a part of our channel. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now's the time to do it so you don't miss out on more awesome content. All right, let's talk about the French Revolution. This was a wild time in France, lasting from 1789 to 1799, and it shook things up like crazy. It wasn't just one thing. It was a mix of social and political changes that really changed the game for France and all of Europe. One major part of the revolution was the end of feudalism and the rise of new ideas about democracy and human rights. You know the storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789? That was a huge deal. It symbolized the people saying, "Enough is enough," and marked the start of a movement toward popular sovereignty. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. The revolution also brought about the Reign of Terror, a dark time from 1793 to 1794, when thousands faced execution by guillotine. Talk about intense. This period was all about extreme violence and political crackdowns. Then came the Thermidorian reaction, which flipped the script and led to the execution of Maximilien Robespierre, the head of the Committee of Public Safety. With Robespierre gone, the revolution started to shift gears. Ultimately, the revolution set the stage for Napoleon Bonaparte to rise to power in a coup d'etat in 1799, making him the first emperor of France. The ripple effects of the French Revolution were massive, inspiring movements for democracy and human rights all over the globe. It spread Enlightenment ideals and helped usher in modern political and social systems. The French Revolution was a real turning point in history, and its impact is still felt today. Now moving on to number 7, the Massacre of El Vele. On May 14, 1920, a horrifying massacre happened in the Ottoman Empire's capital, Constantinople, now known as Istanbul. This tragic event involved the brutal killing of around 50 to 60 ethnic Armenians by a Turkish nationalist mob. These victims were prominent figures, intellectuals, writers, and community leaders who had gathered for a meeting at the historic Valandos Hotel. The motive: the Turkish nationalists saw the Armenians as a threat to the unity of the Ottoman Empire and wanted to wipe them out. It was a brutal attack that resulted in the loss of many influential Armenian lives. The survivors were left traumatized, and the massacre became a dark chapter in the history of ethnic tensions in the region. It wasn't until many years later that the full extent of the massacre came to light. Historians uncovered evidence that the Ottoman authorities were complicit in the violence and had deliberately targeted the Armenian community. The massacre was part of a larger campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide that was taking place in the Ottoman Empire at the time. The Ottoman government accused the Armenians of collaborating with the Russians during World War I and sought to punish them for their perceived disloyalty. The Massacre of El Vele was a tragic event that had a profound impact on the Armenian community and the history of the Ottoman Empire. It serves as a reminder of the dangers of ethnic nationalism and the importance of protecting vulnerable communities. Number 6, the fall of Saigon and the end of the Vietnam War. The fall of Saigon on April 1975 marked the end of the Vietnam War and the beginning of a new chapter in Vietnamese history. When North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, it was a decisive moment in the conflict. The Vietnam War had been a long and divisive one, and its conclusion had a profound impact on both Vietnam and the United States. For the Vietnamese people, the fall of Saigon was a moment of triumph and liberation. It marked the end of years filled with war and conflict, allowing Vietnam to start fresh under the control of the communist North Vietnamese government. After all that turmoil, the end of the war brought a huge sigh of relief and a glimmer of hope for a brighter future for the Vietnamese people. But let's be real. The end of the war didn't mean everything was smooth sailing. The country was still divided, and there was a real risk of more conflict brewing. Plus, the economy and infrastructure had taken a serious beating from all those years of fighting. So the task of rebuilding was going to be a tough one. Still, the Vietnamese people were determined to push forward and create a new future for their homeland. They showed incredible resilience, you know? On the flip side, the fall of Saigon was a huge blow for the United States. It marked a pretty embarrassing and controversial end to their involvement in the Vietnam War. The war had been pretty unpopular back home, and people were itching to bring the troops back. But the way it all ended, abandoning South Vietnam, left a bitter taste in a lot of mouths, creating a sense of disappointment and disillusionment that lingered. The Vietnam War came at a high cost for the U.S., both in lives lost and money spent. It really split the American public and had a lasting impact on the country's politics and culture. While many Americans felt relieved that the war was over, it also brought a wave of grief for those who had lost loved ones along the way. After the war, the U.S. pulled back from its global commitments and turned its focus inward, dealing with domestic issues. The toll of the war was heavy, and it took years for the country to heal and recover. Now, let's switch gears and talk about number 5, the mysterious disappearance of Amelia Earhart. She was a total trailblazer in aviation, the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic and the first person to make a solo flight from Hawaii to California. But what happened to her? In July 1937, Amelia and her navigator, Fred Noonan, took off from Papua New Guinea, trying to fly around the globe. Their Lockheed Electra was loaded with extra fuel tanks to help them go the distance. But somewhere over the Pacific, they lost contact. Search and rescue missions were launched, but nothing turned up. There were tons of theories about what might have happened to them, but none were ever proven. One theory suggests that the Electra crashed into the ocean, leading to Earhart and Noonan drowning. Another idea is that they landed on a remote island and were either killed or captured by locals. Then there's the theory that they were mistaken for a U.S. military aircraft and killed by Japanese forces. Despite all the searches, none of these theories have ever been definitively proven. In 1939, the U.S. government officially declared Amelia Earhart dead, even though her body was never found. The mystery surrounding her disappearance still captivates people today. There have been countless books and documentaries exploring the possible fates of Amelia and her navigator. Her legacy as a groundbreaking aviator and adventurer continues to inspire folks all over the globe. Now let's dive into number 4, the Salem witch trials. These trials were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts from 1692 to 1693. It was a dark and scary time in American history, leading to the unjust persecution and execution of innocent people. The trials kicked off in Salem Village, now Danvers, when a group of young girls started acting strangely, think fits, weird contortions, and odd sounds. People thought these fits were caused by witchcraft, so the girls pointed fingers at several local women claiming they were casting spells on them. Before long, accusations spread like wildfire, and dozens of people found themselves accused of witchcraft. The atmosphere was thick with fear and hysteria, and sadly, those accused didn't get a fair shake. The evidence against them often relied on the testimony of the afflicted girls, which was shaky and easily manipulated. Many of those accused confessed to witchcraft, either out of fear of execution or because they thought it might save them from further persecution. In total, 20 people lost their lives during the Salem witch trials, 19 by hanging and 1 by pressing. The trials eventually wrapped up when it became clear that the accusations were based on false evidence, and the public began to question the legitimacy of the trials. Those who had persecuted the innocent faced backlash, and some were even held accountable for their actions. The Salem witch trials remain a tragic and shameful chapter in American history. It was a time when fear and hysteria led to the persecution of innocent people and a complete disregard for their basic rights. These trials serve as a powerful reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria and the need for due process and the rule of law. Now, let's move on to number 3. But first, a huge shout out to some amazing supporters. Thanks a ton for watching and supporting the channel. If you haven't already, make sure to stick around for more awesome content. Next up, we have the Spanish Civil War. This conflict raged in Spain from 1936 to 1939 and was anything but simple. It involved a mix of factions, ideologies, and international interests. The war kicked off in July 1936 when a group of military officers, led by General Francisco Franco, staged a coup against the democratically elected Republican government. What started as a coup quickly escalated into a full-blown civil war, with various factions aligning themselves either with the Republicans or Franco's nationalists. The nationalists had the backing of conservative groups in Spain, including the Catholic Church and landowners, while the Republicans found support from liberals, socialists, and communists. This war was brutal and resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. Eventually, the nationalists emerged victorious, thanks in part to foreign volunteers and the military support from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. Franco then became the dictator of Spain, ruling until his death in 1975. One of the most notable aspects of the Spanish Civil War was its international dimension. The conflict became a battleground for clashing ideologies: fascism, communism, and democracy. Volunteers from all over the world came to fight, including members of the International Brigades, a group of foreign fighters who stood with the Republicans. The war also saw significant intervention from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, which provided military and material support to the nationalists. The Spanish Civil War was a major event in 20th century history, marking one of the first significant conflicts of the Cold War era and highlighting the rise of fascism in Europe. The war left a lasting impact on Spain, leaving the nation divided and traumatized. The legacy of the Spanish Civil War is still felt today, and it remains a significant and controversial topic in Spanish history. Thanks for watching. Which fact surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time.